To begin my painting, I get the page nice and evenly wet. This makes blending my gouache and poster paints really easy. I lay down my paint fairly thick and wet before I come in with one of my extra wide Japanese hake brushes. As you can see, this brush is a fantastic tool for blending wet on wet, and as long as my page is damp, I can keep adding on more layers of gouache and blending as needed. To get some more rough and exciting texture for my painting, I also use a bristle brush, which really achieves some lovely results as I'm building up the darker tones around the edges of my painting. The scratchy texture, I think, really adds some nice touches. After I trace my pencil sketch back onto my page, I begin using my wide flat synthetic brush to block in the basic colors I want. For this piece, I'm using ivory black, permanent white, yellow ochre, Naples yellow, and some hints of magenta Winsor Newton gouache paint. I really love gouache paint because of how well it can be layered. For the background, I also used a few dabs of my Sakura brand poster colors because of how vibrant they are and how well they blend with my other water-based paints. I used a little bit of purple and some white. Midway into this painting, a storm blew in, and I had to switch to using a lamp after I lost the natural daylight. Fortunately, this wasn't much of a setback, and I could see quite well. Another benefit of gouache paint is how matte finish it is, making it really easy to photograph and film, even under bright studio lighting. Lots of old animation backgrounds painted in analog paint were made with watercolor and gouache paint for this very reason. They're really easy and convenient to photograph. By this point in my painting, I'm mostly blocking in my values, where I want my lighter and darker paints to go, and I'll blend those together as I go on. I used my ivory black and magenta to create these purple-tinted shadows in dark areas. I really like ivory black because it has a bit of a blue undertone to it, and together with the magenta, it blended really nicely. I'm using one of my favorite synthetic brushes, an Above Ground Arts No. 6, which comes to a lovely fine point. This one makes filling in spots with finer detail much easier. For this painting, I'm using a Canson brand watercolor artboard. This is my first time using Illustration Board, and I can really see why people love these. Even with all the water and paint I've added to the board, it's hardly warped or bent at all. I usually prefer hot-pressed paper because of the smooth surface, but this cold-pressed board doesn't have too much paper texture, so it works just fine. Now that my paper is thoroughly dried, you can see just how nicely these paints layer and blend, giving some lovely gradients of color. I'm adding some more highlights to places like the bridge of the nasal bone and under the orbital sockets, as well as cleaning up a few spots and doing a few touch-ups as I go along. I used a resin replica human skull as reference for this piece, and one thing this video doesn't show is how many rough drawings and studies I did before settling on this composition. As well, one of my favorite aspects of painting in traditional mediums like gouache is just how organic the results can look. I do digital illustration all the time for work, and I love supplementing my digital work with traditional paintings like this. It can lend itself to all sorts of fun and unexpected results that I can use for inspiration later down the road. At this stage, the painting is almost done. Sometimes the best way to make your lighter areas of color even brighter is to darken other parts of the painting. Here, I begin to add a few more graphic elements, like some outlines in darker purple and adding some off black to the inside of the nasal cavity, first in dark purple and then in black, letting them blend together on the page. I'm adding some accents of deep purple so that the details of the painting aren't lost or obscured if printed or seen at a smaller resolution. The painting itself is an even 20 centimeters by 20 centimeters. To keep the painting nice and square, I've just used some weak masking tape to border the edges. This also makes it easier to crop the image for printing or framing later once the tape has been removed. And now for my favorite part of the whole painting process, peeling off the masking tape and enjoying the finished result. Without a doubt, this is the most satisfying part of the whole process to me. It's such a joy to see the finished work revealed like this. And there you have it. 6 hours of painting condensed down to just over 5 minutes. I'm very pleased with how this piece turned out, and I really enjoyed filming my progress. Thank you for joining me on this painting adventure.